Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I talk about fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 most anticipated releases for next month, February 2024. This is the first time I'm doing one of these videos in a little bit, so before I jump in, this is the first one I'm doing this year. It would be very helpful for me to know from you if you like these types of videos. So please make sure you leave a comment and let me know, hey, I like this, no, I don't. If you don't feel comfortable leaving a comment, use the up or down, thumbs, because out of all the videos and types of videos I do, this is the one that actually takes the most time. It takes the most time to do this video. So I only want to do it if it is, worthwhile for you. So just let me know and I will commit to either doing more of them or none at all. If you're new here, I typically do not talk about sequels and third or fourth books in series on these lists. I try to either start with the first book of a series or new debut authors. However, again, if you want to hear about those sequels, let me know that too. So I'm going to jump in, and again, these are not in any sort of order other than by publication date. So my 10th pick for February is going to be A Bride by Ali Hazelwood. You may recognize her name because she is a popular romance author. I think she's most well known for The Love Hypothesis, and then I think there was a sequel to that, Love Hypothetically. And this is a romance, but this is actually a paranormal romance, which, if you know anything about me, that is much more my speed. So, according to Amazon, this book is described as a dangerous alliance between a vampire bride and an alpha werewolf. Oh yes, you've already got me right there. You've got me right there. So, Misery Lark, the only daughter of the most powerful vampire councilman of the Southwest, is an outcast. Again, her days of living in anonymity among the humans are over. She has been called upon to uphold a historic peacekeeping alliance between the vampires and their mortal enemies, the Wares, and she sees little choice but to surrender herself in the exchange again. Wares are ruthless and unpredictable, and their alpha, Lowell Moreland, is no exception. He rules his pack with absolute authority, but not without justice. And unlike the Vampire Council, not without feeling. It's clear from the way he tracks Misery's every moment that he doesn't trust her. If only he knew how right he was. Because Misery has her own reasons to agree to this marriage of convenience, reasons that have nothing to do with politics or alliances, and everything to do with the only thing she's ever cared about. And she is willing to do whatever it takes to get back what's hers, even if it means a life alone in Were territory, alone with the wolf. Ooh. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of paranormal romance. Typically, that is the only type of romance that I read. So, I don't think her books are known for being steamy. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So, I expect this to be kind of like the Sherilyn Kenyon books that I read, but without all of the sex. I mean, there might be some sex in here. I don't see the steam level being off the charts like some of those books. But who knows? I reserve the right to be surprised. If you want to be surprised, Bride will be out on February 6th. My second pick of the month is going to be The Woman by Kristin Hannah. Now, I've only read a couple Kristin Hannah books. I read The Nightingale, one of her most famous ones, and The Great Alone. I know she's very popular for her historical fiction, and I think she's a really good writer. She does a really good job of getting that emotion through on the page. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are looking forward to this one, her newest book. So, according to Amazon, this one says, women can be heroes. When 20-year-old nursing student Frances Frankie McGrath hears those words, it is a revelation. Raised in the sun-drenched, idyllic world of Southern California and sheltered by her conservative parents, she has always prided herself on doing the right thing. But in 1965, the world is changing, and she suddenly dares to imagine a different future for herself. When her brother ships off to serve in Vietnam, she joins the Army Nurse Corps and follows his path. As green and inexperienced as the men sent to Vietnam to fight, Frankie is overwhelmed by the chaos and destruction of war. Each day is a gamble of life and death, hope and betrayal. Friendship runs deep and can be shattered in an instant. In war, she meets and becomes one of the lucky, the brave, the broken, and the lost. But war is just the beginning for Frankie and her veteran friends. The real battle lies in coming home to a changed and divided America, to angry protesters, and to a country that wants to forget Vietnam. The Woman is a story of one woman gone to war, but it shines a light on all women who put themselves in harm's way and whose sacrifice and commitment to their country has too often been forgotten. A novel about deep friendships and bold patriotism, The Women is a richly drawn story with a memorable heroine whose idealism and courage under fire will come to define an era. Okay, so obviously this book sounds like it could be super powerful. I don't believe that Hannah has written a book about the Vietnam War before, and I've never read a historical fiction about that time period, so I think that's a really interesting time period to explore. And I think some of the things that are mentioned in this description, you know, a divided America, protesters, country that wants to forget, even though this book is taking place in 1965, a lot of those things are very much what's going on today. So I feel like this book has a timeless, classic feel to it. So again, I haven't read everything Kristin Hannah has written. I've only read the 2 books, but honestly, I think this one would probably make a great third. If you are one of the ones that are looking forward to this book, The Woman will be available on February 6th. My third pick for February, and probably the one that I personally am most excited for, is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. If you recognize this author's name, she's most well known for The Bear and the Nightingale, the Winter Night trilogy, and again, if you've been here for a while, you will know that the final book in that trilogy, Winter of the Witch, was my absolutely favorite book of last year. So I have been scouring the internet wanting to know when her next book was coming out. It's finally here, so I am definitely going to pick this one up. So the setting of this book is January 1918. Laura Ivan was a revered field nurse until she was wounded and discharged from the medical corps, leaving behind a brother still fighting in Flanders. Now home in Halifax, Canada, Laura receives word of Freddie's death in combat along with his personal effects. But something doesn't make sense. Determined to uncover the truth, Laura returns to Belgium as a volunteer at a private hospital where she soon hears whispers about the haunted trenches and a strange hotelier whose wine gives soldiers the gift of oblivion. Could Freddie have escaped battle only to fall prey to something or someone else? November 1917. Freddie Ivan awakens after an explosion to find himself trapped in an overturned pillbox with a wounded enemy soldier, a German by the name of Hans Winter. Against all odds, the two form an alliance and succeed in clawing their way out. Unable to bear the thought of returning to the killing fields, especially on opposite sides, they take refuge with a mysterious man who seems to have the power to make the hellscape of the trenches disappear. As shells rain down on Flanders and ghosts move among those yet living, Laura's and Freddie's deepest traumas are reawakened. Now they must decide whether their world is worth salvaging or better left behind entirely. Okay, so there's another war book story going on here, but completely different time period, completely different setting. I am really curious to see what type of mythology she leans into in this one. So the Winter Night trilogy was very much influenced by Russian and Slavic folklore and fairy tales. So I don't know if the Canadian setting is going to have some folklore, if the Belgian setting, like, I'm just really curious to see what she does with this one. Really curious. I've loved the 3 books in the Winter Night trilogy, so I have really high hopes and really high expectations for this one. If you have really high hopes for The Warm Hands of Ghosts, it'll be available on February 13th. My 4th pick for the month is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. Now, this is a debut fantasy novel. I don't believe this author has published anything, or not through a major publisher anyway, but this one sounded interesting to me. So it's about a young girl named Casey Andrews who works in a New York City bookshop, shelving books, making coffee for customers, and living an unassuming, ordinary life. Until one day, one of her favorite customers, a lonely yet charming old man, dies right in front of her. Cassie is devastated. She always loved his stories, and now she has nothing to remember him by. Nothing but the last book he was reading. But this is no ordinary book. It is the Book of Doors. Inscribed with enigmatic words and mysterious drawings, it promises Casey that any door is every door. You just need to know how to open them. Then she's approached by a gaunt stranger in a rumpled black suit with a Scottish brogue who calls himself Drummond Fox. He's a librarian who keeps watch over a unique set of rare volumes. The tome, now in Casey's possession, is not the only book with great power, but it is the most coveted by those who collect them. Now, Cassie is being hunted by those few who know of the special books. With only her roommate Izzy to confide in, she has to decide if she will help the mysterious and haunted Drummond protect the Book of Doors and other books in his secret library's care from those who will do evil. Because only Drummond knows where the unique library is, and only Cassie's book can get them there. But there are those willing to kill to obtain those secrets, and a dark force in the form of a shadowy, sadistic woman is at the very top of that list. I always love a book that's about books, and I did see in like the little blurb here that they are comparing this book to The Night Circus, one of those like modern stories that mixes like the wonder of the unknown with a touch of darkness. So this sounds like something that could be totally right up my alley. If it sounds like it might be up your alley, The Book of Doors will be available on February 13th. My 5th book of the month is going to be With a Little Luck by Marissa Meyer. Now, Marissa Meyer, I've only read 4 of her books before, which are the 4 main books in the Lunar Chronicles. I love the Lunar Chronicles. I think they're really fun. So this is a romance. It's described as a sweet romantic comedy, but it does look like it has a little bit of a fantasy element. So because of that, I feel like I'd be willing to try this one, even though it's not something that I would typically gravitate towards. So let me know if you feel the same after I read the description here. Jude is determined to fly under the radar. He just wants to draw comics, host D&D night with his friends, work at his parents' vinyl record store, and escape high school as unscathed as possible. That is, until the night he finds himself inexplicably gifted with a bout of supernatural good luck. Suddenly, everything Jude has ever wanted is within reach. His art is being published, he helps his friend's song become a finalist in a songwriting competition, and he wins a pair of coveted concert tickets, which he can use to ask out the popular girl he's been crushing on since elementary school. But how long can June's good fortune last? And why does he find himself thinking about Ari, his best friend since forever? If Jude has been dreaming of the wrong girl this whole time, does that mean he's doomed to be unlucky in love forever? With a sprinkle of magic, this sweet beachside romance is perfect for fans of To All the Boys I've Loved Before and Love and Gelato, as well as anyone who has ever swooned over Marissa Meyer's beloved characters. Now, I have swooned over some of her characters before. This sounds a little bit too sweet and happy for me, but I still think it might be worth a read. So if it sounds like just the right amount of sweet for you, with a little luck, will be available on February 13th. Number 6, I think, is maybe a little bit more on the darker side, and that is Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear by Robin Wasley. And this book says that it's perfect for fans of the Raven Boys and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 2 things that I absolutely love. Also, I think that cover is pretty cool too. So again, this is another story about high school kids, and it says, high school is hard enough to survive without an apocalypse to navigate. Sid Spencer has always been the most normal school in her abnormal hometown, a tourist trap built over one of the fault lines that seal magic away from the world. Meanwhile, all Sid has to deal with is hair-ruining humidity, I know how that feels, painful awkwardness, being one of 4 Asians in town, and her friends dumping her when they started dating each other, just days after one of the most humiliating romantic rejections anyone faced ever in all of history. Then, someone kills one of the guardians who protect the seal. The earth rips open and unleashes the magic trapped inside. Monsters crawl from the ground and no one can enter or leave. And the man behind it all is roaming the streets with a gang of violent vigilantes. Suddenly, Sid's life becomes a lot less ordinary. When she finds out her missing brother is involved, she joins the remaining guardians, desperate to find him and close the fault line for good. Fighting through hordes of living corpses and uncontrollable growths of forest, Sid and a ragtag crew of would-be heroes are the only thing standing between their town and the end of the world as they know it. Between magic, murderers, and burgeoning crushes, Sid must survive being a perfectly normal girl caught up in a perfectly abnormal apocalypse. Only, how can someone so ordinary make it in such an extraordinary world? So reading that, I can definitely see the similarities to both the Raven Boys and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm sure someone can probably tell me this in the comments, but there is definitely a well-known quote from Buffy about an apocalypse. I can't think of it off the top of my head, and I'm sure I'm going to kick myself later. But yeah, that sounds like it could be really fun. So if it sounds like it might be really fun to you, Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear will be available on February 13th. My 7th pick for February is going to be Son of Blood and Ruin by Marilee Lares. First of all, I mean, that cover alone, it just draws the eye. It's so striking. So that definitely is what called me to this in the first place. And then in the second place, I found out that this was a fantasy inspired by Spanish mythology. Some of you may remember that I read Together We Burn last year. That was also inspired by Spanish folklore, which I really enjoyed. So hopefully this one will scratch that itch. So this is about a new legend that begins. In 16th century New Spain, witchcraft is punishable by death. Indigenous temples have been destroyed, and tales of mythical creatures that once roamed the land have become whispers in the night. Hidden behind a mask, Pantera uses her magic and legendary swordplay skills to fight the tyranny of Spanish rule. To all those who know her, Lenora de las Casas has never leaves the palace and is promised to the heir of the Spanish throne. The respectable, law-abiding Lady Lenora faints at the sight of blood and would rather be caught dead than meddle in court affairs. No one suspects that Lenora and Pantera are the same person. Lenora's charade is typically good. With magic running through her veins, she is nearly invincible. Nearly. Despite her mastery, she is destined to die young in battle, as predicted by a seer. When an ancient prophecy of destruction threatens to come true, Lenora, and therefore Pantera, is forced to decide, surrender the mask or fight to the end. Knowing she is doomed to a short life, she is tempted to take the former option. But the legendary Pantera is destined for more than an early grave, and when she discovers the truth of her origins, not even death will stop her. Okay, so clearly this has a bit of a Zorro vibe to it, which I think is really cool. I loved the Zorro movies when I was growing up. We even watched like the old show like way back in the day. So I think this could be like a really fun, maybe a bit of a swashbuckling type fantasy. I just love the image of like a prim and proper lady in the court who's secretly like a masked vigilante who goes out at night. That is so cool. So if you think Son of Blood and Ruin sounds cool to you, it'll be available on February 20th. My 8th pick for February is going to be A Tempest of Tea by Hafsah Faizal. And if anyone recognizes that name, it's because they wrote We Hunt the Flame, which I know was a popular YA fantasy a few years back. So this is a new fantasy. Allegedly, it's supposed to be a duology, which I love. I love to know like a book is only going to end in 1 or 2 volumes because I'm kind of over these series that are like 4 or 5 books long. So anyway, this one says, on the streets of White Roaring, Arthi Casimir is a criminal mastermind and collector of secrets. Her prestigious tea room transforms into an illegal bloodhouse by night, catering to the vampires feared by society. But when her establishment is threatened, Arthi is forced to strike an unlikely deal with an alluring adversary to save it. She can't do the job alone. Calling on some of the city's most skilled outcasts, Arthi hatches a plan to infiltrate the sinister, glittering vampire society known as the Aetherium. Not everyone in her ragtag crew is on her side, and as the truth behind the heist unfolds, Arthi finds herself in the midst of a conspiracy that will threaten the world as she knows it. Dark, action-packed, and swoon-worthy, this is Hafsah Faizal better than ever. Okay, so again, I just read Six of Crows for the first time last year. That was a magical heist book that I absolutely loved. So the fact that this is a magical heist book, definitely I am intrigued. I also love that it's described as dark and action-packed. If those things are true, that is definitely right up my alley. And those are the types of books that I really, really like. And swoon-worthy, yeah, I am open to being swooned. I am open to being swooned. So if you are open to being swooned, A Tempest of Tea will be available on February 20th. Okay, number 9 is going to be The Bad Ones by Melissa Albert. If you recognize this author's name, she wrote The Hazelwood, which I know was a pretty big seller, and then she also wrote Our Crooked Hearts, which I read a year or 2 ago. I wasn't like super impressed with Our Crooked Hearts, like I thought it was okay, but I'd definitely be willing to give something else a try for her. So, I mean, I like dark, sinister magic books, so that is what this one sounds like. So, this book says, in the course of a single winter's night, 4 people vanish without a trace across a small town. Nora's estranged best friend, Becca, is one of the lost. As Nora tries to untangle the truth of Becca's disappearance, she discovers a darkness in her town's past, as well as a string of coded messages Becca left for her to unravel. These clues lead Nora to a piece of local lore, a legendary goddess of forgotten origins who played a role in Nora and Becca's own childhood games. An arresting crossover horror fantasy threaded with dark magic, The Bad Ones is a poison pen, a love letter to semi-toxic best friendship, the occult power of childhood play and artistic creation, and the razor-thin line between make-believe and belief. So the fact that it's described as a horror fantasy crossover is really what has me the most interested here, because I do love when horror and fantasy cross. I do like darker stories like that. I'm just into that right now. So if that sounds like something you would be into, The Bad Ones will be available on February 20th. And finally, that brings me to number 10, my 10th most anticipated release for next month. It's going to be A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen. I know that she has written the Bridge Kingdom series. I've never read that, but this is being described as one of like the must-read fantasies of the year. I don't think that's true because, you know, they always say that when new books are coming out. But it does sound like it has the potential to be really, really good. So let me know what you think. This book is about a young woman named Freya. Bound in an unwanted marriage, Freya spends her days gutting fish, but dreams of becoming a warrior and of putting an axe in her boorish husband's back. Freya's dreams abruptly become reality when her husband betrays her to the region's Jarl, landing her in a fight to the death against his son, Bjorn. To survive, Freya is forced to reveal her deepest secret. She possesses a drop of the goddess's blood, which makes her a shield maiden with magical capable of repelling any attack. It's been foretold that such magic will unite the fractured nation of Scotland beneath the one who controls the Shield Maiden's fate. Believing he's destined to rule Scotland as king, the fanatical Jarl binds Freya with a blood oath and orders Bjorn to protect her from their enemies. Desperate to prove her strength, Freya must train to fight and learn to control her magic, all while facing perilous tests set by the gods. The greatest test of all, however, may be resisting her forbidden attraction to Bjorn. If Freya succumbs to her lust for the charming and fierce warrior, she risks not only her own destiny, but the fate of all the people she has sworn to protect. So yeah, I can definitely see why this book has some Jennifer Armentrout vibes from Blood and Ash. I think it's cool that it's like a Norse-inspired fantasy, or I guess in this case I should say a Norse-inspired romantasy. And yes, while I do have my issues with romantasy, I think like the Norse-inspired stuff hopefully will overcome that. Because I have read some of John Gwyn's Norse-inspired books, so Hunger of the Gods, Shadow of the Gods, and I really, really liked them. So because I've liked them, I'm willing to give this one a chance. So if you're willing to give this one a chance, A Fate Inked in Blood will be available on February 27th. So there you have it. Those are all my top picks for next month, February 2024. So now I want to know from you, what are you most looking forward to next month? Was it one of the books I mentioned? Was it one of the books I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, oh my god, that tickles so much, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more Sleepy Swiper coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading.